Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the CFR training webinar for 2024 calendar year consolidated fiscal report. We have a good sized crowd today with approximately 780 attendees. So hopefully we don't have any issues with the WebEx. Both of the webinar sessions will be recorded and posted on YouTube. So if you have a colleague that could not make it or you want to listen to training again, you will be able to. We will send an email out to all providers notifying them of when they are available and where they can be found. My name is Alpa Amin, a representative from OPWDD, and I will be the host for the two webinars we have scheduled this week. Today's New York State representative will be as follows. Representing OASS, Paul Green, Paul Sutton, Lisa Vickery. Representing OMH, Michelle Zielinski, Josh Becker, Ann Hoffman. Representing OPWDD, Francis Acilio, Kenneth Glinmeyer, Alpa Amin, Emily Seward. Representing SED, Catherine Cogan, Mackenzie Whistler, Ian Hobbs. Representing DOH, Jeffrey Nicholson, Nicole Malusi. Also, we have a survey that will pop up at the end of the event. We would greatly appreciate you taking the time to fill out the survey so that we can continue to make these trainings better each time. Session 1 will cover getting started, CFRS web, code reporting CFR 1 through DMH 1. Question and answers. Hopefully, you have had the opportunity to check out previous Q&As that have been posted on the OMH website listed on the screen. We strongly encourage all attendees to ask questions through the Q&A function in the webinar. It is on your right-hand side of your screen, and you might have to click the arrow next to the Q&A to open up the dialog box. If you don't see it, click the three dots at the bottom right of the WebEx and then click Q&A. We will not be answering questions today, but plan on answering all the questions and posting answers online, along with a recording of this webinar so that everyone can get the benefit of this webinar and questions asked. CFR contact information. When you have questions, this slide shows how to contact each agency. Most of us are still working a hybrid in-office remote schedule, so all the agencies prefer email contact. New York State Department of Health providers may submit questions regarding their CFR submission by email to DOH email address listed on this slide. Any questions related to claims can go to the contact listed on this slide. As noted on the previous slide, email would be the preferred method. By end of this seminar, we hope to accomplish the following goals. Introduce providers to the CFR manual and CFRS web, provide advanced agency contact information for specific questions not covered during this training session, help providers become familiar with the CFR core reports, discuss important policies, principles, and rules regarding completion of the CFR. I will now pass on the presenting to our first panelist.
Thank you, Alpa. This is Paul Sutton from Oasis, and we're going to talk about getting started. The CFR manual contains 9 general overview sections with sections for each of the core, claiming, and supplemental schedules. Each of these should be reviewed before beginning work on your CFR, and the manual is available online at the SED website as noted below. If you click on that link, and this is the website you get to. And the manual and appendices are available for download here, as well as a 30-day extension request if needed, And also the transmittal letter is available here, which details all the latest updates and changes from the prior period. The CFR is used as a year-end cost report that documents service provider expenses and revenues on one consolidated report and is shared by the 5 New York State agencies. The cost report information is used for rate and fee setting, cost of living increases, and fiscal analysis. And the year-end state claiming document is a basis of payment for your final claim on the CFR period. The cost report is also referred as the CFR core schedules, which are the CFR 1 through CFR 6 and the DMH 1. The claiming documents are the DMH 2 and DMH 3 schedules. Now, full accrual accounting must be used when reporting fiscal information on the core schedules, and for your claiming documents, the DMH 2 and DMH 3 may be completed on an accrual, modified accrual, or cash basis of accounting. Those of you that file a mini abbreviated CFR may complete all your required schedules on either accrual, modified accrual, or the cash basis of accounting. Now, what do we mean by accrual accounting? The goal of accrual accounting is to account in the periods in which they occur, the effects of transactions and other events and circumstances to the extent that those financial effects are recognizable and measurable. This means that revenue is recognized and recorded when earned, regardless of when you receive payment, and your expenses are recognized and recorded as they are incurred, not when they are paid out. And your salary and personal services are reported in the period they are incurred, not the period the paycheck is issued. And note that the CFR may not match your quarterly payroll reports for this reason. There are 4 types of CFR submissions: a full, an abbreviated, an Article 28 abbreviated, and a mini abbreviated. The type of CFR a service provider must complete depends on the type of programs operated and the amount and type of funding received from the state agencies. You should review the submission matrices in Section 2 of the CFR manual to determine the type of CFR submission required. Now, if you are funded by more than one New York State agency, the most stringent reporting requirements apply for all required filings. This means if you operate programs for both OASIS and OMH, and OASIS only requires you to file an abbreviated CFR, but OMH would require a full, you would therefore need to file the full CFR. This is a screenshot of the submission matrix we just discussed, and it can be found in Section 2 of the manual, and there are 5 different matrices for determining the correct submission type for your agency. You should select the applicable matrix and answer a series of yes or no questions to determine the correct submission type to prepare. Note that for purposes of determining submission requirements, Medicaid managed care is considered to be Medicaid. And Section 2 also contains various notes relating to agency-specific reporting requirements and exceptions. These matrices change often and should be reviewed yearly. CFR reporting periods are generally based on the geographic location of a service provider's corporate headquarters. This training covers the January 1st through December 31st, 2024 calendar year reporting cycle. All programs that are operated during this time should be reported on the CFR. Now, if your agency has a contract for one or more programs that are funded on a period different than your agency's standard reporting period, an additional mini abbreviated CFR may be required for the non-standard filing period. We call this a dual filer. The additional CFR will use the reporting period specified by the contract, and the most common off-cycle contracts are for special legislative grants or member items. For example, a provider has its corporate headquarters in Manhattan and operates programs in both Manhattan and Westchester County must submit their primary CFR on the standard reporting period of July 1st through June 30th. This provider would complete the CFR detailing the expenses and revenues for all programs in operation during that time, including those for Westchester County. Further, they must also submit a secondary mini-abbreviated CFR in the January 1st through December 31st period for the programs funded by Westchester County only. Additional information regarding secondary submissions can be found on pages 3.1 and 3.2 of the manual. Due dates. The due dates are as follows. For the 2024 CFR, for OMH and SED providers, your CFR will be due on May 1st with a 30-day extension required to be submitted on or before that time. Now, if you file OASIS, OPWDD, or DOH, the due date is June 1st, and with no extensions granted. And state agencies will not be responsible for any loss of state aid resulting from noncompliance with all the required deadlines or late amendments. And to ensure compliance in submitting accurate CFRs and required supporting documents, each agency can impose sanctions or penalties. The imposition of sanctions or penalties may include withholding of advance payments, suspension or revocation of your operating certificate, or notification of noncompliance to DOH for medical providers or for Medicaid providers. Now, because each state agency has different types of penalties, we will not discuss those in detail here, but will be discussed later during each agency's specific section. Now, if your agency is funded through an LGU contract, you should check with the county for their specific requirements regarding CFR and final claim submissions. Your LGU may require a submission due date that's earlier than the New York State agency prescribed due date. New York State agency CFR requirements are the minimal requirements regarding CFR submissions, and LGU requirements can be stricter but can never be more lenient. And lastly, sending copies of your certification schedules to the county does not fulfill your requirement with the state agencies. CFRs are prepared and submitted using a CFR web found at the following link. In addition to the submission of the CFR, the certification schedules, agency financial statements, and parent agency allocation supporting documentation should be submitted through CFRS web. Additional instructions on how to upload the certification schedules will be discussed later in the presentation. Please do not mail paper copies of the CFR core schedules to CFR units in Albany. It's important to remember that the CFR web is the preferred method of submitting certifications. In addition, OASIS, OMH, OPWDD, and SED will continue to accept emailed PDF copies of all required certifications. OMH, OPWDD, and SED will also accept paper copies. And DOH will only accept the certifications that are electronically uploaded through CFRS web. When a revised CFR is submitted, a provider is required to upload revised certifications complete with a new DCN number as follows. For OASIS providers, a new CFR I, II, III, and IV are required. Note that subsequent to a CFR II being received, OASIS will accept an attestation reporting minor changes in lieu of the additional II from your accountant. For SED and OPWDD providers, a new CFRI and II is required. And for OMH and DOH providers, a new CFRI is required. Note that for OPWDD providers, a new certified CFRI and II, if they were required under your original submission, is required. Only CPA certified CFRs will be utilized for calculation of OPWDD reimbursement levels or any other initiative that utilizes a CFR for calculation of funding or reimbursement. Providers may submit revised CFRs or certification schedules in CFRS Web that have not been certified in compliance with other agencies' requirements. However, OPWDD's CFR unit will not accept them without certification. Now, for those of you that do choose to email in your copies of your certifications, OASIS and OPWDD prefer the below naming structure for your files. Now, in this naming structure, the 5 digits to start is your 5-digit agency code, followed by the period for which the certifications are for, and then the 8-digit number is the current DCN number for the certifications that you are sending. OMH and SED have no specific file name that they require. Consolidated financial statements, including all affiliates, must be submitted electronically as PDF files through CFRS Web. In addition, financial statements reflecting information on the provider as a standalone entity should be uploaded if they are available. And providers that are required to have a single audit based on the Uniform Guidance and Compliance Supplement must upload a copy of that audit report to the funding agency via CFRS Web. And your financial statements should only be uploaded one time for a fiscal reporting period unless there are changes. This means if you have to make revisions, you do not need to upload financial statements for each subsequent revised CFR. And please do not upload draft financial statements. We can't use them. We're just going to ask you to wait for the final ones anyway. And financial statements are not required for many abbreviated CFRs. And lastly, OPWDD will not accept paper copies of the financial statements. Prior period financial statements can also be uploaded through CFRS Web. It is preferred that CPA audited financials correspond to the CFR reporting period. However, if your agency's corporate fiscal year is different than the CFR reporting period, submit financials with an end cycle date that falls within the reporting periods you are submitting for. It is recommended that the audited and certified financial statements include the prior year's data in the presentations of the balance sheet and income statement or a comparably labeled schedule. Tips on record keeping. Program payroll and fringe benefits should be reconciled to the general ledger on a monthly or quarterly basis. Salary allocations between different programs should be carefully monitored. Expenses and revenues should be monitored on a regular basis and compared against your approved budgets. Units of service provided by programs should be tracked on a regular basis, and non-allowable costs should be tracked on a regular basis for easy identification when preparing your CFR. Program descriptions and units of service definitions can be found in appendices E, F, G, H, and HH. And a list of some but not all non-allowable costs can be found in Appendix X. A cost must be reasonable and or necessary for providing services in both its nature and amount. In determining the reasonableness of a given cost, consideration will be given to whether the costs incurred in rendering the services are generally recognized as ordinary and necessary for the operation of the organization and the restraints or requirements imposed. providers operating DMH programs should refer to Appendix X of the CFR manual for a list of some but not all non-allowable costs. All non-allowable costs included as an expense on any line of CFR core schedules must be reported on the adjustment or non-allowable cost line of the applicable schedule. The following are some examples of non-allowable costs that must be adjusted out of the reported costs. Costs that are not properly related to patient care and principally afford diversion, amusement, or entertainment to owners, operators, or employees. Costs related to the purchase of alcoholic beverages. Costs resulting from violations or failure to comply with federal, state, and local laws. And the cost of training afforded staff that does not directly relate to the fulfillment of their required duties. And also note that expenses which are acceptable per GAAP or the IRS may or may not be reimbursable. The allowable cost of a related party transaction is the lower of the related organization's actual cost or the fair market value of providing the goods or services supplied. All related party transactions, as well as entity-wide agency administration, must be disclosed and detailed on the Schedule CFR 5. All excess related party costs included as an expense on any line of any CFR schedule must be reported on the adjustments non-allowable line of the applicable schedules. Fringe benefits. Fringe benefit expenses that are not reasonable and available to all employees are non-allowable and must be adjusted out of the reported costs on the applicable schedule. Non-allowable fringe benefits may include supplemental executive retirement plans or any non-qualified deferred compensation plans. CFRS Web is a common platform for the providers of the 5 New York State agencies that are required to submit CFRs and CBRs. All New York State agencies and their programs are to be reported on one consolidated CFR. And CFRS Web requires entry of agency information and program site information. Only program codes and funding source codes valid for the CFR reporting period can be used. CFRS Web must be used for all new CFR submissions and any revisions to prior period CFRs. Previous submissions retroactive to calendar year 2012 are available and view to edit. Signature pages will continue to be uploaded through the CFRS Web. Now, most questions you may come up with can be answered by reviewing the CFRS web page. Can be located at the below link, or the CFRS Web User Guide, located in the Web menu under Help. After reviewing the Help Guide, if you require additional assistance or have additional questions, working in the CFRS Web, please contact your local CFR state agency representative at the link below. If technical assistance is required, such as a CFR web application not responding, then you can contact the DITS Help Desk. But please contact your local CFR unit first, as most questions can be answered, from your local agency. User access to CFRS Web must be authorized by the service provider's security manager. The security manager at the provider agency assigns a CFRS Web role to fiscal staff involved in reviewing, preparing, or submitting CFRs. The assigned user role can be viewed by clicking on your username at the upper right section of your screen. A different set of permissions is associated with each role. If a different level of access is needed, the user should contact the security manager at the provider agency. The various user roles are as follows. The reviewer reviews all documents within the application, including those not yet submitted. The user does not have the ability to create and complete new documents, revise previously created documents, or document submission permission. A preparer creates and completes new documents. They also review and revise all documents within the application, including those not yet submitted to the state agencies. The preparer does not have submission availability. The submitter can do all three. They can create and complete new documents. They can review and revise all documents within the application, including those not yet submitted. Providers can have the same role assigned to multiple users. For example, having multiple users designated as a submitter may be useful in meeting filing deadlines. Instructions for each user, such as a CPA, instructions for a user such as a CPA or fiscal person to retain the same user ID for multiple providers. If a user being created is a CPA or fiscal user, then the user should be asked if they have an existing ID with a different agency. If they have an existing ID, you should send an email request to your state agency CFR unit requesting they add this user to your agency by providing the following information. You should include that user's name, their primary user ID, the agency code they wish to be added to, and the CFR role that they wish to be assigned. Once the above noted information is provided to your state agency CFR unit, the request will be processed and the results relayed directly to the user. And this ends my section of the presentation, and I'll now pass off to the next user.
Hi, my name is Emily Seward, and I will be speaking to you today about the CFRS web homepage. Once a user logs in, at the top of the homepage is the announcement board. Any important CFR info will be displayed here. Below the announcement board are 4 sections: create a submission, continue submission, and upload completed CFRs, review or revise CFRs and upload documents, and helpful links. The color of the buttons indicates the user's accessibility according to their user role. Yellow buttons mean the user can access, and gray buttons mean there is no access for the user. Only a user with the preparer or submitter status can create a new submission. To begin, the user will click on the yellow Create a Submission button. First, you select the submission type from the drop-down. Second, choose the state agencies that are to be reported. Next, choose the reporting cycle and reporting period. Be careful when making this selection because once you go to the next screen, you cannot go back and change it. Lastly, you must answer the question, would you like to carry forward data from a prior submission? And then you would enter a submission description if you would like, and click Next to go to the next screen. If you did not carry forward data, you will begin at the Provider Agency Definition screen, which includes basic agency data. If you did carry forward data, then the most recent submission for each reporting period will be available to choose for the source of the carry forward. Only the most recently submitted DCN will be available for carry forward selection for each reporting period under the same parameters. You would select which choice for your carry forward here. After selecting the DCN, you must select transferring all data or master data only. Master data includes agency info, program and site info, and personal service data, while all data includes master data and numerical input. Once you are done here, you click Next. If your new submission does not include all the agencies that were previously reported in the last submission, the following warning will appear. If you wish to move forward, then click Next. If you would like to edit your agency selections, then click Back. After clicking Next, you will receive a confirmation that the carry forward is complete. Please review all the transferred data to ensure that it is accurate. The certified financial statement start date and end date will not carry forward, so please make those selections. To make a selection, click on the calendar icon and select the desired date. Once finished, then select the next schedule at the bottom of the page. Before moving on, please verify that all the program and site data is correct. Click the pencil to make any edits to the programs or sites. Click the trash can icon if you need to delete a program or site. Please note that the edit feature only allows change to the details of the selected program. If you need to change a program code, you will have to delete that program code and then add the correct program as a new program. To do so, you would click the Add a Program button and enter the data. Once you are done entering the new program info, hit Save to move on. While you're working on the CFR, please keep in mind that after 30 minutes of inactivity, the user will be logged out and will have to re-enter their login info to continue working on the CFR. Thankfully, CFRS Web will automatically save all the previously entered info, so don't worry about saving all the time. If you do get logged out while you're in the middle of working on a CFR, to continue working on an unsubmitted CFR or CBR, click on the View in Progress CFR/CBRs button. This is also known as the Work in Progress section. All the CFRs that are considered work in progress will be listed here. You can select which CFR you wish to work on here. If the submission is available for edit, the choices will include View Submission, Edit Submission. Selecting View Submission will allow the user to view the submission but not change any of the data. If you select Edit Submission, you will receive the following notification that you will be the user of the record and no one else will be able to edit during your session. From there, you are offered 3 options: Continue Edit, Stop Edit, or Delete Submission. If you choose to continue the edit, you will be directed to the Provider Agency Info section. By selecting Stop Edit, the following message will pop up to state that your session has ended and others may revise the CFR now. If you choose Delete Submissions, this warning will appear asking you to confirm if you would really like to delete the CFR. Please be careful here because if you delete the CFR, you will not be able to get it back. If the CFR has been assigned to DCN and has passed final validations, it will appear here as DCN assigned but not yet submitted under the status column. After selecting the DCN assigned but not yet submitted submission, it will present options to View Submission, Edit Submission, or Submit Submission. Selecting View Submission will allow the user to view the submission but not change any of the data. If you select Edit Submission, a warning will appear indicating that the DCN will be removed and that the submission will not be available for edit by other users. This means that the CFR will have to pass final validations again. If you would like to submit the CFR, then select the Submit Submission button. This feature is also available from the Utilities menu. Please note that only those with the submitter role in CFRS Web can complete a CFR. After submitting, the following confirmation message will appear and you can go back to the submission dashboard. Selecting the Submission Dashboard button will return you to the Review or Revise CFRs or CBRs and Upload Documents section of the homepage. All of the submitted CFRs are stored here, so you will be able to see the CFR that was just submitted. Moving on now to the Review or Revise CFR section of the homepage. This is where you can work on a CFR that was already submitted. You can also upload any supporting documents like financials or certification pages here. All submitted CFRs going back to 2012 are available in the Submission Dashboard and are sorted by the reporting period, DCN, submission type, state agencies, and submitted date. Select from the drop-down the desired category of document type, CFR only, budget only, or CFR and budget to find the desired submission. You can expand and collapse the reporting period by clicking on the arrow to the left of the row and choose the desired submission by clicking on the row. You can also use the search box to filter by DCN, submission type, state agencies, and submitted date. Once a submission is selected, the options to view submission or revise submission becomes available. If you select to view the submission, you will not be able to edit the submission. By selecting Edit Submission, a message will appear reminding you that a copy of the CFR or CBR will be created and the submission in progress will not be available for edit by others until you log off by selecting Stop Edit or after 30 minutes of inactivity. By selecting Yes to the notification, a newly created copy will be available for editing and will not contain a DCN. Please note that the use of submission description box will help to identify the purpose of the revised submission. In CFRS Web, there cannot be multiple work-in-progress CFRs that have the same reporting period and submission type. In this example, there is already a fiscal year 21-22 CFR established in the work-in-progress section. In addition to revising CFRs in this section, you can also upload financial statements, certification schedules, and parent agency admin allocation documents here. To upload any documents from the homepage, select Review or Revise CFRs/CBRs, then select the reporting period and DCN of the supporting document you wish to upload. All New York State agencies prefer to receive these supporting docs by uploading to CFRS Web. Please keep in mind that in order to upload docs for a certain DCN, the CFR with that DCN must be submitted first. From the middle of the screen, select the desired button and checkbox, if necessary, of the document you wish to submit. Then, browse the files on your computer to select the desired file to upload. Please note that the CFR-I, CFR-II/II, and the CFR-III or any combo can be uploaded as one PDF. Please note that the above option to use an electronic signature by checking the box. Once the file has been selected, click Upload. A message confirming a successful upload will appear here after uploading, as you can see at the bottom of the screen. The process to upload any more supporting docs is the same as just stated. Simply select which doc you would like to upload. Please be aware when uploading financial statements that consolidated financial statements show aggregated financial results for multiple entities or subsidiaries associated with a single parent company. By selecting the Uploaded Documents arrow, the drop-down box will show a history of previously submitted documents. If you submit supporting documents by mail or email, then you will not be able to view them here. So just another reason to please upload. The last section of the home page we will go over is the Helpful Links section. Here you will be able to have access to view the CFR manuals, OMH and SED extension requests, transmittal letters, and any CFR training updates. The link to the CFR training on the OMH website lists all of the CFR reporting agencies, contact info, and CFR training information when available. That concludes the homepage section of the presentation, and I will pass it along to the next speaker.
Good morning, everyone. This is Lisa Vickery from the Office of Addiction Services and Supports, and today I will go over the menu and certification schedules. The first thing to remember is that you must be actively editing a CFR to have full use of the menu options. Once you are in the CFR, you can use the menu to navigate between schedules. The menu icon can be found in the top left corner of any page in CFRS Web. Once selected, the expanded menu will be visible on the left side of the screen. The menu lists the schedules in the recommended order of completion. However, you may complete the schedules in any order. If you choose to complete schedules out of order, remember that specific data will not be seen until the feeder schedule is completed. Once the feeder schedule is completed, that information is carried forward to another schedule. For example, on a full CFR, the information entered on the CFR4 Program Site Specific tab is carried forward to CFR1, line 16, and the information entered on the CFR4 Agency Administration Specific tab is carried forward to CFR3, line 1. Each screen has a Next Schedule and Previous Schedule button at the bottom of the page. By default, the Next Schedule button follows the recommended order of completion. The gold line indicates where you are in the menu. Currently, the gold line is on the Provider Agency Definition screen. You will need the following information regarding your agency to complete the Provider Agency Definition screen: your 5-digit agency code, the legal name of your organization, the street address and county of your administrative headquarters, ownership type, which would be not-for-profit, proprietary, or governmental, federal ID number, and your agency's audited financial statement reporting period. If you imported data from a prior period CFR, the information will be transferred and should always be reviewed for accuracy. The start and end date of your financial statements does not transfer and will always need to be completed. If you did not have a prior period CFR to import data from, the bolded lines indicate required information and must be manually completed. To complete the program and site definition screen, you will need the following information regarding your agency's programs and sites: the types of programs your agency operates, the New York State agencies that certify or fund the programs, and for each program being operated, you will need the 4-digit program code and 2-digit index code, the site code, or PRU for OASIS, and the physical address and county of the program site. If you imported data from a prior period CFR, the information will be transferred as long as the program code is still valid for the current reporting period. The program and site code can also be entered manually. This screen has 3 options. You can add a program by clicking on the button at the top right, edit a program by clicking the pencil icon, or delete a program by clicking on the trash can. When adding a shared program, all New York State agencies involved should be selected. The certification schedules are the CFRI, CFR-III, Compliance Review, CFR-III, and CFR-IV. Based on your agency's ownership and CFR submission type, the certification schedules that require data input will be listed in the menu. The preferred method for submitting the signed certification schedules is CFRS Web, which will be discussed later in the presentation. The CFRI is used to report agency identifying data and serves as a certification statement by the agency's CEO, attesting to the validity of the information contained in the document and is required for all CFR submissions. Information in the gray area is non-enterable and has been carried forward from the provider definition screen. All bolded fields must be completed. Use the check boxes provided to indicate if any contact information has changed from the prior period submission. This would include changes to the following: agency address, contact person, who is also referred to as a fiscal contact and should be the person able to answer questions regarding the CFR, the Chief Executive Officer, who is also responsible for signing the CFRI, the President, Chair, Board of Directors, and the claims contact. If your agency receives state aid from OASIS, OMH, or OPWDD, this should be the person who can answer questions regarding the claim. Up-to-date CEO and fiscal contact emails are essential to receive communication from the New York State agencies. If the contact person and claims contact are the same, click Copy Contact. The information will be automatically filled in. Once completed, select Next Schedule to proceed. In summary, the CFRI is required for all CFR submissions and must be signed and dated by your Executive Director or Chief Executive Officer. It requires contact information for the agency's fiscal contact and executive director. The contact information for the President, Chair, Board of Directors is required for not-for-profit corporations. It is optional for proprietary service providers and is not required for governmental entities. It should be uploaded in CFRS Web and have the same DCN as a submitted CFR. The CFR IIIA schedules are the independent accountant's report. Imported data should be reviewed for accuracy and all applicable fields should be completed. Additional lines were added regarding the CPA peer review and CPA registration with the State Education Department and will be discussed later in the presentation. In summary, the CFR IIIA is required for most full CFR submissions. It should be signed and dated by an independent certified public accountant, sole practitioner, partner of the CPA firm, or the CPA firm that audited and certified the CFR, and should adhere to audit examination guidelines in Appendix AA of the CFR manual. It should be uploaded in CFRS Web and have the same DCN as the CFR submitted. Please keep in mind that the CFR IIIA prints on multiple pages and all pages must be uploaded to meet the filing requirements. A CFR II or IIA will be printed based on the audited financial statement reporting period that was entered in the provider agency definition screen. Counties, municipalities, and other governmental entities completing a full CFR may submit either a CFR IIA or a compliance review. The compliance review must address the agreed upon procedures specified in Appendix CC and include the DCN of the CFR submission that was reviewed. The compliance review schedule has been added to CFRS Web for governmental entities. It includes the same language as the independent accountant's report on applying agreed upon procedures from Appendix CC. An enterable line has been added regarding the sentence that states, "The following information and findings came to our attention from performing the procedures described in this report. Itemize all information and findings. If none, so state." There have been additional lines added to the compliance review schedule regarding the CPA peer review and CPA registration with the State Education Department and will be discussed later in the presentation. The signed compliance review should be uploaded in CFRS Web and have the same DCN as the submitted CFR. The CFR III must be completed if state aid is received through a local county contract or a direct contract with OASIS, OMH, and/or OPWDD. It is not required for providers that operate only rate-based and/or unfunded programs. If your agency is funded through a direct or local contract, required signatures are as follows. Direct contract. The executive director must sign and date the left side of the certification statement designated for voluntary local service provider. Local county contract. The left side of the certification must be signed and dated by your executive director, and the right side must be signed and dated by the county director of community mental health services. Counties must have the middle section of the certification signed and dated by the county fiscal officer, and the right side signed and dated by the Director of Community Mental Health Services. The signed CFR III should be uploaded in CFRS Web and have the same DCN as the submitted CFR. New York State agencies ask that you submit a signed and dated copy of the CFR III to them at the same time it is sent to the county. The CFR-IV is a series of yes, no, or non-applicable questions regarding the fiscal status of the agency. Question 4 was divided into 4A and 4B. The newly added question refers to single audits and will be discussed later in the presentation. Question 13 was also added. The newly added question refers to SED providers and will be discussed later in the presentation. The CFR-IV schedule is used to report agency identifying data and serves as a certification statement by the service provider's chief executive officer, attesting to the validity of the information contained in the document under the penalties prescribed in accordance with Article 175 of New York State Penal Law. It is not required for governmental service providers or many abbreviated CFRs. It should be uploaded in CFRS Web and have the same DCN as the submitted CFR. This is the end of my section. Let's take a 5-minute break before the next presenter starts.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ann Hoffman from the Office of Mental Health. I'll be going over the CFR 4, CFR 4A, and CFR 1 schedules. CFR 4 is Personal Services. It's a 2-tab data entry screen. The first tab is Program Site, Program Administration, LGU Administration, and the second tab is Agency Administration. If you are completing the Program Site tab, select a state agency, program, and site from the drop-down boxes. If you transfer data from a prior period, some rows may be pre-populated. If you wish to create a new row of data, select Add a Line. Next, select the desired position title code from the drop-down box. Then enter the standard work week, aggregate total hours paid, and amount paid for all individuals working in the specified position title code. Repeat the same steps for each additional position title code. CFRS Web will calculate the FTEs to 3 decimal places. In order to delete an entire row of data, click on the trash can icon located in the desired row. If applicable, completion of the informational-only section is required. The total hours paid and total amount paid should include the amounts of overtime reported. The informational-only section includes overtime hours included in total hours paid, overtime amount included in total amount paid, average hourly rate, and annualized salary. Located at the far right of the screen is a total for the program site reporting for each position title code sharing the same standard work week. The column headers are as follows. Under state agency, total for all programs. Total hours paid, FTE, total amount paid. To complete the Agency Administration Personal Services, select the Agency Administration tab and follow the same process. Only 600 series position title codes are available for use. CFR 4 is included in all CFR submission types. New York State agency-specific and shared program-specific CFR 4s are prepared for staff providing program services. Agency administration staff is reported in a single column on a separate schedule CFR 4. All agency administration staff is reported in this column regardless of the size of the New York State agency programs in relation to the total agency. Individuals receiving 1099 tax forms are considered to be independent contractors. Position titles are listed in Appendix R. The positions are functional titles and may not match the corporate titles used by your agency. Position title codes may be specific to New York State agencies or program types. For example, position title code 211 will not be an option in the drop-down list for an OPWD program. $100 level are support staff, $200 level are direct care staff, $300 level are clinical staff, $400 level production staff, $500 level program administration staff, $600 level agency administration staff, $700 level local government unit staff only. Direct care and clinical staff hours are a key component of the rate rationalization process for OPWD. Please be sure to give your staff the appropriate codes. The standard work week must be at least 35 hours, but no more than 45 hours per week. The hours paid, FTEs, and amount paid totals are shown by column. Where applicable, employees' hours and salaries paid should be allocated between programs and/or position titles. This is the calculation of FTEs. It's the hours paid divided by the standard work week times 52 weeks. So this example shows the calculation of the FTE and represents the most complicated calculation, a less than full-time employee who worked for less than a full year. So the person worked, standard work week is 35 hours per week, and the employee worked 22.5 hours a week for 40 weeks during the fiscal year. CFRS Web does all the calculations for you. The totals of the CFR 4 input carry forward to CFR 1, line 16 for full CFRs, CFR 3, line 1 for full CFRs, DMH 1, line 6 for abbreviated, and Article 28 abbreviated CFRs. CFR 4A, contracted direct care and clinical personal services. This schedule is used to report the amount paid to individuals or organizations that have contracted with the service provider to provide direct care and/or clinical personal services. All other contracted services must be reported on the appropriate expense line of the CFR 1 or CFR 3 schedule. It's the same data entry process as CFR 4, except the input of the standard work week is not required. Direct care hours, so position title codes 200 to 299, and clinical hours, position title codes 300 to 399, are an important part of OPWD's rate rationalization formula. Be sure to report an accurate total for contracted hours on the CFR 4A. CFR 4A is only included in full CFR submission types. If contracted staff are not paid by the hour, an estimate of hours paid must be made. Entries of 0 or 1 hour will not generally be accepted. Questions regarding whether or not an individual is a contractor or an employee should be directed to the IRS, the service provider's accountant, and/or tax attorney. CFR 1, Program Site Data General Information. CFR 1 is a 3-tab data entry screen: General Information, Expenses, and Revenues. To enter program site data, select a state agency, program, and site from the drop-down boxes. Gray fields are not enterable. The data is populated from a different schedule or screen. Data on lines 1 through 6 and 8 carries forward from the program site definition screen. For Medicaid eligible programs, report both the Medicaid Provider Agreement Number on line 7A and the National Provider ID Number, NPI, on line 7B. Both the numbers should be associated with the program site being reported. CFR 1 is only included in full CFR submission types. CFR 1 is a state agency-specific, program site, shared program-specific schedule. CFR 1, line 13, units of service. It is critical that units of service delivered during the reporting period are captured, counted, and reported accurately and correctly. Inaccurate units of service reported is cause for rejection of submitted CFRs. OASIS programs. Units of service should be similar to those reported by the entity to the OASIS client data system through the monthly service delivery function, except when the reporting guidance varies. Refer to Appendix E for individual program CFR reporting requirements. OMH programs. OMH units of service carry forward from the OMH1 schedule. There will be more on OMH1 later in the presentation. The units of service reported are accrued based on the date of service, not the date of payment. All units of service provided must be reported, including those for which no payment was received. CFR 1, line 13, it's a calculated total of lines. 13A, Medicaid fee-for-service. 13B, Medicaid managed care. 13C, all other units of service. Refer to page 13.5 of the CFR manual for additional guidance. CFR 1, program site data expenses. There are more expense lines that can be displayed on one screen. Use the scroll bar on the right side of the screen to access the lines not displayed. Remember, expenses and revenues are reported on the accrual basis of accounting. The expense categories: personal services, vacation leave accruals, fringe benefits, other than personal services, equipment, property, and agency administration. Line 16, personal services, is carried forward from Schedule CFR 4. Line 17, vacation leave accruals, report the increase or decrease in vacation accruals from the previous year. Line 18, mandated fringe benefits, includes FICA, Medicare, workers' comp, unemployment insurance, New York State disability, and New York State family leave. Line 19, non-mandated fringe benefits, includes health insurance, dental insurance, and pensions. Line 22, repairs and maintenance, includes costs for maintenance and minor repairs as well as contracts for housekeeping, garbage, and snow removal. Line 26, participant incidentals, includes costs associated with participant entertainment, recreation, summer camps, clothing. Line 28, expense equipment, the cost of all program, site, and/or program administration, non-adaptive equipment purchased during the cost report period with a value of less than $5,000 or a useful life of less than 2 years. Refer to Appendix O of the CFR manual for more information regarding how equipment is reported in the CFR. Line 35, contracted direct care and clinical personal services, is carried forward from Schedule CFR 4A. Line 36, supplies and materials, non-household, includes costs for program supplies, medical supplies, printing, copying, postage, computer software. Line 39, insurance general. The insurance costs for general liability, bonding, professional and medical malpractice, vehicle, or other insurance costs related to program, site, and program administration. Do not report insurance expenses related to equipment or property on this line. The OTPS, equipment, and property categories each have an other line for miscellaneous items. Information is entered through a line detail box. Detail is required for individual items costing $1,000 or more. Individual items costing less than $1,000 each may be grouped together as all items under $1,000 each. Data input for lines with a line detail box icon can only be entered by clicking on the icon to the right of the line. Line detail boxes are customized to meet specific New York State agency needs with predefined item descriptions. Additional item descriptions can be added by clicking Add a Line and typing in the new description. Be specific in your description. Data entered in the line detail box is totaled, and the details are shown on the worksheet detail section of the CFR. Do not report items on line 40, OTPS Other, that should be reported on a specifically defined line. Two examples of items reported on CFR 1 line 40, which should have been reported on predefined lines, include copying, printing, postage of $1,227 should be reported on line 36, supplies and materials, non-household. Rubbish removal of $3,999 should be reported on line 22, repairs and maintenance. Bad debt expense and/or credit losses. Bad debt expense and/or credit losses should be reported on the appropriate schedule as follows. CFR 1 line 40 and adjusted out is not allowable on line 66. CFR 2, column 9, line 4, and adjusted out is not allowable on line 8. CFR 3, line 17, and adjusted out is not allowable on line 41. Refer to the FAQ on page 8.13 of the CFR manual for further guidance. The predefined entry, bad debt, has been changed to bad debt and/or credit losses. Certain assets are depreciated. Line 44, vehicle. Line 45, equipment. Line 51, building. Line 52, building and/or land improvements. All items with an individual cost of $5,000 or more and a useful life of 2 or more years must be depreciated. See Appendix O of the CFR Manual for guidance on capitalization and depreciation. Group purchases of like items should be treated as a single purchase. Group purchases of unlike items should be treated as if each item was purchased individually. Telephone systems and computer systems should be treated as a group purchase. Line 66, adjustments, non-allowable costs. Enter the description, line number, and amount of all non-allowable expenses reported in any line of the CFR in the line detail box. Negative numbers cannot be entered in the line detail box. Refer to Appendix X for some, but not all, non-allowable costs. Report the amount in excess of actual cost or fair market value for related party transactions disclosed on CFR 5 as an adjustment on CFR 1, line 66. The line number refers to where the individual expense is originally reported and is being adjusted out as non-allowable. OPWD only informational lines F and G are for reporting phase 1 of the workforce stabilization, and lines H and I are for reporting phase 2 of the workforce stabilization. Lines 68A, B, D, E, F, G, H, and I will be discussed during the OPWD agency-specific section. CFR 1, revenues. Remember, expenses and revenues are reported on the accrual basis of accounting. Line 69, participant fees. Report revenues received from program participants in excess of SSI and SSA. Line 72A, Medicaid fee for service. A revenue category representing payments received for services to eligible participants under the combined federal-state program, which pays for medical care for those who cannot afford it, regardless of age. Line 72B, Medicaid managed care, a delivery system of Medicaid health benefits and additional services through contracted arrangements between state Medicaid agencies and managed care organizations that accept a set per member per month payment for these services. Line 74, other third parties. The revenue from private health insurance coverage, which includes but is not limited to Blue Cross, HMOs, and other insurance carriers. Line 79, federal grants. Report grant revenues received directly from an administering federal government agency in support of the service providers programs. CFR's web includes the following predefined entries: U.S. Department of Agriculture, Education, Health and Human Services, Justice, and Labor. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development is for OASIS only. CFR's web has been modified to include predefined entries for Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, Economic Injury Disaster Loan Emergency Advance, EIDL, and Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, grants. Do not include federal grant revenue received from OASIS, OMH, OPWD, and DOH as aid to localities funding. Additional lines are available by use of the Add a Line button in CFR's web. Line 80, state grants. Report grant revenues received from New York State agencies other than the CFR reporting agencies. CFRS Web includes the following predefined entries: New York State Department of Health, Labor, Transportation, Division of Criminal Justice Services, Housing and Community Renewal, Parole and Veterans Affairs, and the New York State Office of Children and Family Services. This does not include monies received from OASIS, OMH, OPWD, and/or SED, and does not include aid to localities funding received from OASIS, OMH, and/or OPWD. Instead, those monies would be reported as net deficit funding on line 93. Line 82, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, better known as SNAP. Report food-related revenues. This is for OASIS and OPWD programs only. Line 83, Gifts, Legacies, Bequests, Donations. Report the monetary contribution revenue derived from gifts, legacies, bequests, and donations. Non-monetary donations and contributions are reported as reconciling items on the reconciliation if the schedule is required. Please see the FAQ section of the CFR manual for additional details. Line 86, Prior Period Rate Adjustments. Report the revenue from a rate appeal, rate adjustment, or retroactive contingency contracts. Do not include net deficit funding amounts on this line. SED, report any reconciliation adjustments from a prior period, including any reconciliation tuition adjustments included as part of the prospective tuition rate. OASIS and OMH, this is not applicable to OASIS and OMH service providers. OPWD, Medicaid recoveries should be reported on this line. Lines 93 and 103, net deficit funding. Funds received by the local government unit from a DMH state agency and passed on to the service provider. Funds received directly from a DMH state agency via a direct contract. Funds received directly from the funding local government unit. Line 94, other revenue. Some examples include OASIS, closely allied entity revenue for opioid settlement funds. OMH, safety net payments, vital access providers Medicaid revenue. OPWD, assistive supports revenue, revenue for non-Medicaid eligible individuals under predefined OPWDD state paid. CFR 1, revenues, other lines, continued. The revenues, GAAP adjustments to revenues, and non-GAAP adjustments to revenues categories each have an other line for miscellaneous items. Information is entered through a line detail box. Detail is required for individual items of $1,000 or more, and individual items less than $1,000 each may be grouped together as all items less than $1,000 each. This concludes my portion of the presentation, so I will pass it off to our next presenter.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kate, and I represent the State Education Department in the Rate Setting Unit. I will be speaking about the CFR2, CFR2A, and CFR3. As you can see, this is a sample of the CFR2 Agency Fiscal Summary. It is on page 31 of the sample that you received. CFR2 captures the expenses and revenues for the entire agency. The totals for each New York State agency are displayed in separate columns. The agency's activities, not inclusive of state programs, are to be reported in column 9, other programs. So column 9 is enterable. Data for columns 2 through 8 carries forward from DMH1. The agency totals, column 1, is calculated by CFRS Web, which is the sum of columns 2 through 9. Column 1, lines 7, 9, and 10 should match the respective categories in your financial statements. If there is a discrepancy between the CFR2 and your financial statements, it should be explained through the input on the reconciliation. The CFR2 agency fiscal summary continued. So also reported in column 9, the expenses and revenues relating to fundraising and special events. Please note that fundraising special events are not considered agency administration expenses and cannot be reported on CFR 3. It is also expected that the CFR reporting of fundraising and special events will match the reporting in your agency's financial statements. But also in column 9 are realized and unrealized gains and losses, management services expenses provided to another provider agency as an ongoing basis. The provider agency totals reported in column 1 will be compared to your financial statement totals. If the reporting periods are the same, any discrepancies will need to be explained in the reconciliation. Operating expenses reported on CFR2 are used to distribute agency administration expenses between the CFR reporting programs. Operating expenses including personal services, vacation leave accruals, fringe benefits, and other than personal services, less raw materials. The reconciliation schedule is not required if the CFR reporting period and the financial statement period are different. If a reconciliation schedule is required, it must be completed in order to pass validation. In the CFR sample we received, it is page 94. Governmental entities, Article 28 abbreviated and mini abbreviated CFR filers are not required to complete the reconciliation. For a required reconciliation, the amount calculated as the difference in the worksheet should be less than $100 in order to pass validations. Here's a sample. So report the sum of total expenses and total losses as reported in the financial statements. Using the additions and subtractions drop-down detail boxes, report the expenses and losses included in the CFR2 that were not included in the financial statements. The reconciliation revenues. Common reconciling items may be reported as additions, subtractions in the reconciliation schedule, such as elimination of intercompany expenses and revenues, depreciation differences. Differing allowable depreciation methods have been reported in the CFR and Statement of Activities expense in the financial statements. Other, report any other item differences between the financial statements and the CFR that are not reported as adjustments, not allowable costs on CFR 1 or CFR 3. A description should be added with any items reported here. Rounding. Any remaining difference between expenses reported on the financial statements and the CFR should be reported on this line. CFR 2A, which is pages 32 through 34 of your sample. The CFR 2A schedule must be completed by all not-for-profit and proprietary providers when financial statements are required to be submitted. It is not required for the Article 28 abbreviated filers, mini abbreviated filers, and governmental entities. The schedule is used to report data from your financial statements that were submitted in accordance with sections 2 and 6, and also data from the underlying year-end adjusted accounting records that support these financial statements. The purpose of this schedule is to collect data in a uniform way in order for each state agency to have it readily available for provider-specific fiscal analysis, as well as industry-wide statistics. Instructions for completing Schedule CFR 2A can be found in Section 14 of the CFR manual. These next couple tabs are samples. So in CFR 2A, Section 28 has been renamed to Operating Transactions. Line 28A is used to report operating revenues and operating gains. And 28B is used to report operating expenses and operating losses. COVID-19 for a new line for 2023 calendar and forward. Report the total amount of revenue and gains on the extinguishment of debt recorded in the CFR reporting period that was attributed to COVID-19 funding grants, loan forgiveness, contribution, donations, awards, and or tax credits. Include in total revenue and gains the COVID-19 grants awarded from federal and or state agencies, counties, and private foundations. The amount of Paycheck Protection Program loan that was forgiven and recorded as revenue or as a gain on the extinguishment of debt. The COVID-19 federal tax credits that were recorded as revenue. Donations received as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So you will report the total revenue and gains on an accrual basis of accounting. CFR 3 Agency Administration. Agency administration consists of the costs associated with the overall direction of the agency, general record keeping and financial management, governing board activities, public relations, excluding those costs associated with the fundraising and special events. Direct identification of specific expenses is a preferred method for charging expenses to various functions. Further, indirect costs are those activities or services that benefit more than one project or activity and may require to be allocated. In this case, the allocation method must be reasonable, consistent, and reviewed by management. Some examples include time studies, square footage, actual use and percentage of direct cost. No proper documentation should be retained regarding the methods used. For more information, you should consult the CFR manual appendices I and K. Full CFR filers report the agency administration costs for the entire provider agency on a single CFR 3 schedule. Abbreviated CFR filers complete the agency administration worksheet in lieu of a CFR 3. Note that the CFR 3 sample is pages 35 and 36 of your sample. Again, it's an agency-wide schedule. The CFR 3 is a 3-tab data entry screen. You will see at the top, it's separated by personal services, fringe benefits, and other than personal services. The second tab is equipment and property, and the third tab is the ratio value. The expense categories: personal services, which would be from Schedule CFR 4, vacation leave accruals, fringe benefits, other than personal services, equipment, property, parent agency administration allocation. Remember, fundraising and fundraising special events costs are not to be reported on CFR 3. They are to be reported in full on CFR 2, column 9. If parent agency administration allocation is reported on line 38, documentation of the administration allocation must be submitted with the certification schedules. This must include total parent agency cost, total allocated cost to each of the subordinate agencies, and the basis used for the allocation. Section 15 of the CFR manual was revised to provide additional guidance on reporting parent agency administration allocation on CFR 3, line 38. Line 6 of the CFR 3 is audit, legal, and accounting, includes the cost of other accounting services such as payroll services and CFR audit cost. Line 14, contracted personal services such as management consulting services IT support, and more. Items with a cost in excess of $5,000 must be listed in the line detail box separately by description and amount. Items costing less than $5,000 each may be aggregated and listed as all items less than $5,000. Costs to develop internal use software during the application development stage are capitalized and not included on this line. Refer to U.S. GAAP Codification of Accounting Standards topic 350-40 internal use software, and refer to U.S. GAAP Codification of Accounting Standards topic 350-50 website development costs. Line 16, Insurance General. Insurance costs for general liability, bonding, crime and fidelity, professional malpractice, vehicle or other insurance costs related to agency administration. Do not report insurance expenses related to equipment or property on this line. The other than personal services, equipment, and property categories each have an other line for miscellaneous items. Information is entered through a line detail box. Detail is required for individual items costing $1,000 or more. Individual items costing less than $1,000 each may be grouped together as all items less than $1,000 each. Note that if the total of the grouped items is excessive, you may be asked for a detailed breakdown. Line 41 of the CFR3, adjustments non-allowable cost. Enter the description, line number, and the amount of all non-allowable expenses reported in any line of the CFR3 in the line detail box. Refer to Appendix X for some but not all non-allowable cost. Report the amount in excess of actual cost of fair market value for all administrative related party transactions disclosed on CFR 5. The amounts entered must be greater than or equal to 0. Line 42, net agency administration is the amount to be allocated using the ratio value method. All data elements are populated by CFRS Web, and all calculations are performed by CFRS Web. Calculated values are carried forward to CFR 1, CFR 2, and DMH 1. CFR 3 ratio value allocation. The total corporate agency administration expenses are allocated to all agency funding sources using the ratio value method. The ratio value method uses operating costs of the program sites as the basis of the allocation. Operating costs are defined as personal services, vacation leave accruals, fringe benefits, and other than personal services, less raw materials. Schedule CFR 3 uses a two-step process to allocate agency administration cost, but CFRS Web completes all the calculations for you. So part 1 of the ratio value allocation. Total corporate agency administration expenses from CFR 3, line 42, are allocated to each funding New York State agency. Operating costs for program codes 0880 and 0890 are excluded from this ratio value calculation. I'm going to read some steps. Please note that you can refer to the manual and or the packet that was handed out to you. So step 1, calculation steps. Total agency operating costs are carried forward from CFR 2, columns 2 through 9, to CFR 3, lines 43 through 50, and are totaled on line 51. Line 51 is carried forward to line 53. Net agency administration is carried forward from CFR 3, line 42, to CFR 3, line 52. Line 52 is divided by line 53 to develop the 6-digit ratio value factor on line 54. The ratio value factor is applied to the operating costs on CFR 3, lines 43 through 50, to calculate each funding source's share of agency administration costs, and the allocation is displayed on lines 55 through 62. Step 2. A second ratio value allocation is performed at the state agency level, exempting additional New York State agency-specific programs. A list of the program codes not included in the Step 2 calculation can be found in Section 15 of the CFR manual. So the Step 2 calculation steps. The second step of the ratio value allocation is done within the New York State agency shares assigned in Step 1, allowing additional specified program types to be exempted. The second step, exempted programs, are OPWDD program code 0190 and OMH program codes 0860, 0870, 1230, 1690, 2740, 2850, 2860, 2980, 6920, 8810, and programs with an A program code index or startup. The adjusted ratio value factors are displayed on lines 71 through 77. So this sample that I am showing you is not included in the packet that you received. The agency administration must be calculated using the ratio value method. This is for abbreviated filers. Enter total agency administration expenses on line 8. But the CFRS web does the rest. So agency administration final thoughts. All agencies have agency administration expenses. Agency administration expenses need to be distributed to all activities fairly. Ratio value is a required method used to allocate agency administration expenses on the core reports. Ratio value is based on operating costs. In calculating expected administrative and overhead expenses, hospitals should use the most recent available allocation percentages from the step-down derived from the latest Institutional Cost Report, ICR, for the period submitted to the Department of Health, Office of Health Insurance Programs, OHIP, as per Appendix Y. For more information on the CFR3 schedule, please see Section 15 of the CFR manual. For more information on agency administration in general, please see Appendix I, Section 42 of the CFR manual. Please refer to Appendix T, Section 53, for more information on how to calculate agency administration on an abbreviated CFR. That concludes my presentation, and I will pass this on to the next presenter.
Hello, my name is Francis Vasalio. I work in the CFR unit at OPWDD. If any of you had your mind fogged over a little as the intricacies of agency admin allocation was explained, take heart. If you do a full CFR, it's all done automatically by the program. We're going to talk about Schedules 5 and 6. Now, the previous schedules that have been discussed, 1, 2, 3, 4, are interactive. Information that you enter in one schedule often flows to one or more other schedules. Schedules 5 and 6 stand alone. They're for information purposes and mainly, and calculation in one case. So CFR 5 is for related party transactions. It can be between your agency and a parent organization, or it can be with other organizations that may have, let's say, one of the members of your board is the head, owns a carting company that you contract with to pick up your solid waste, things like that. And it's not a bad thing to have these relationships. If you are based in a small community, it's unavoidable oftentimes. The key here is to disclose. So CFR 5, the idea is that if you're doing business with another organization in which there are significant parties in your organization and that organization which are in significant roles that could influence the management of the organization, then you should be reporting it. One place you can get a clue for this is oftentimes your CPA will have a section of your financial statement where they list some relationships with people that you're doing business with. It's not a bad thing ever to report the connectivity between the two organizations. It looks worse for you if you choose not to report it because it looks like you're hiding something. There are two questions at the beginning of CFR 5. The first question has to do with whether you're paying money to an organization that has related parties. The second question is if you're receiving funding from an organization with related parties, which could be from a parent organization. For most of you, the answer to both of these questions will be no, and that means you're done with CFR 5. So that's the good news. If you do have related party transactions, then you want to list them. Oftentimes, let's say the daughter of your executive director works for an organization that you do business with. And let's say she's in a significant role. You may list that. Sometimes you'll have somebody who is in a significant role, and that's okay too. That's not what's really covered here. We're talking about significant people in each organization having relationships with each other. If you purchase supplies from a business that has a related party involved in it, and you are paying the market rate, then there's no problem. It's not non-allowable in that case. If you, the one case where you see it comes up that begins to be an issue is when you're doing business with somebody and it involves real estate. Because the rules are, even if you're paying the market rate for renting space in someone's building, if they're a related party, you're only allowed to mark down as allowable expense the amount equal to their actual costs. So that gets tricky, but here's an example, this slide 181, where it just shows disclosures here. You see on the first row there's $1,000 difference between the allowable costs and the amount that you're paying in rent. So that 1,000 will come into play in a minute. You have to report if you were buying, if you were contracting for that solid waste removal at a rate higher than the fair market value, then the amount that you're paying that's above fair market would not be allowable either. Section C deals with the real estate that I was mentioning again a minute ago. So the owner of the property has to disclose to you the amount they're paying for depreciation, or they have for depreciation, their cost, the mortgage interest, their taxes, the insurance on the building, et cetera, et cetera. There's a drop, column 8, there's a drop down, and you list any other expenses they have. And they come out with a total there of $67,000. Now, if you remember back on that previous slide, we were paying $68,000. So their actual costs are $1,000 less than what was we were paying them. So then, because these schedules, Schedule 5 is not interrelated, interactive with previous schedules, you have to go back to either CFR 1, go to line 66, which is not allowable, or for CFR 3, go back to line 41, and you have to enter that difference there. So you see here, under line 66, adjustment to lease, $1,000. So you paid $68,000. Their expenses were $67,000. So $1,000 is not allowable, and you have to list it on line 66 as a non-allowable expense. Now, the second part that we covered there were the two questions. First was when you pay money to the other organization or business, and the second was where you receive funding. In that case, here on section D is where you report the funding that you received from a related party. Again, this is just disclosure. If it's a parent agency, it may be quite common that you're receiving some funding from them for whatever reason, and you just report it here. Section 6, Schedule 6, I'm sorry. This is where you're going to give us information about your board members and your executive officers and other staff that are highly compensated. So the key here is that you're going to report if your board members are paid. Now, a lot of organizations will have an executive director who serves as president of the board, but they're not really being paid for being a board member, and they usually are not voting members of the board. So you don't have to list them as a being paid board member. Most organizations have boards that work on a volunteer basis. And if you're reimbursing them, say, for mileage to attend your board meetings, that's not considered paying them either. The other issue here is you're going to list here in Schedule 6, everybody who makes $150,000 a year from your organization, and anybody with Title Code 601, which is Executive Director, 602, Deputy Executive Director, 603 is like your CFO. Even if their annualized salary is less than $150,000, they are to be listed. And also there's a section here in CFR 6 where you list the independent contractors the highest ones that you compensate. So the governing board, there's a question. Do any of the employees that serve on your governing board, this must be answered yes or no, and then you list who they are. And then here's an example of listing somebody, and it's the 602 staff person, and you list their name and their title. And then here we go to Section 2, asks for any of the board members who receive compensation. As I said before, oftentimes these are in volunteer positions, and reimbursement for expense is not considered compensation. Here's an example. Here's a board member who's being paid $10,000, and they're actually getting $2,500 as a fringe benefit. So you're reporting that here. Again, this is about disclosure here. And you can see the button add line. If all your board members are receiving compensation, $10,000 each, you would list them all there. Section 3 is where you report the highest paid salary. We've increased that in recent years to $150,000 a year, and that's an annualized rate. If they only receive $75,000, but they only work 6 months for the year, their annualized rate is going to be $150,000, so they would be reported. Also, Title Codes 601, 602, and 603, regardless of their annualized rate. Here's an example where you have staff people who are making, you see the example there, line 5, there's somebody who made 110, but they received $40,000 in a contracted payment, so they qualify. You see somebody there who is, let's see, 603, the last line, they're only making $85,000 a year, but because they have a 603 job title code, they have to be reported. Now, column 9 is for other benefits received. This could be a car allowance. This could be some life insurance for the executive director, things like that. If these expenses are not, if these benefits are not available to all the members of all the staff, then they're not reimbursable. And then you would go back, in this case, since it's CFR 6, it's admin, you'd go back to CFR 3, line 41, and list what's not an allowable expense. In this case, it shows here the $1,200 that was that auto lease that we showed you before on the previous slide. We're listing that here as a non-allowable, and we're telling it the line number. One mistake I see people make oftentimes is they don't list the correct line number of where the expense is reported in CFR 1 or CFR 3. So you got to make sure that should never be. Sometimes I see people list 41 there in the non-allowable line. That's referring back to its own line. This line number is the line where the original expense is recorded in your CFR. And now we'll go to there's a section of CFR 6 where you're listing the highest paid independent contractors. These could be CPA firm, legal, medical consultants. The 5 highest who are making at least $50,000 a year, you report them here. Again, this is just disclosure so that we can see the interrelatedness of different entities. Here's an example of that, of it being listed here. These are the people that receive, these are not staff members. They're people who were paid, and they're in the 5 highest. Here they have 2 people who made $50,000 a year or more. So you listed both of them there. DMH1. Now, if you're doing a full CFR, you don't really have to pay attention to DMH1 because everything flows from the previous schedules to DMH1. If you're doing an abbreviate or Article 28 abbreviated CFR, you have to manually enter the data into the DMH1. Many abbreviateds don't need it. If you're doing a CFR that's only for SED or DOH, you don't need to worry about the DMH1. Now, you've entered programs in CFR1. You set them up, well, whether you did CFR1 or not, you set up certain programs that you have. It's a combination of the program number and the index code will determine in DMH1 whether that information is going to be consolidated into one column or whether it's going to be separate. To give you an example, a lot of our providers have multiple IRAs or multiple DAHAB sites. Based on the program type and what you're recommended to use as an index code, DMH1 consolidates those all together, all the total revenue and expense. If you've got FSS contracts with us, each contract we want to see separate on the DMH1. So they're going to have that combination there of the program type and the index code would lead it to be separated on the DMH1. You use full accrual accounting on the DMH1, and the same rules apply there as they apply in the other schedules for the CFR. Here's an example of a DMH1 that's completed. Because it's an abbreviated, it had direct entry to fill this in. Some lines, let me go back there for just a second. Some of these lines, you could have an expense line or a revenue line where you have a drop-down screen that you have to go in and list the different expenses separately, and then the total will appear on that line. Here's another example. Here we're getting into the revenues, and they're being listed out here. Again, there could be some drop downs that have to be filled in to get the total. Now, at the bottom of your screen, you see that orange button there, which is a transfer button. And you click that to transfer the data from the DMH1 to the DMH2. And in some cases, one tricky thing we came across with some people this year, if you just hit this button and then you say transfer all, like program 0670 is a shared program with OPWDD and OMH. They require a DMH2 and 3 for that. We do not. And then if you just press the button and say transfer all, then you won't be able to get a DCN because it's asking you for contract information and so forth that don't exist for OPWDD. So after you hit this button, it'll list the programs. Don't automatically choose to transfer everything. Only transfer programs that you need to do DMH schedules for, claiming schedules. And now I'm going to transfer this to Alpha again.
So, help function. When in the doubt, use the help function. We believe this is a useful tool. Within the menu function, at the bottom, you can find the help icon. A PDF file with the help contents will open in a separate browser tab. You can also click on the help icon next to the schedule name, and the PDF file specific to the schedule will open in a separate browser tab. Thank you once again for participating in the CFR training webinar for 2024 calendar year consolidated fiscal report. In case you missed the beginning of the webinar, please take the time to fill out the post survey after you leave the event. It will help us make this training better. This webinar has been recorded and will be posted online shortly. An email will be sent out notifying you of the location. The Q&As will be carefully reviewed and answer will be posted online as soon as possible. This concludes CFR Training Session 1.